Hi, it's Professor Murray. Welcome back to Project Management. Today's lesson is on resource management. It's a very important topic in project management. Let's get started. There's two main activities that we do with resource management. One is we do a RAM, a responsibility assignment matrix. That lists out essentially who does what, who's responsible for each part of the project. And then the second we do is resource loading. How much of each resource do we need? And most importantly, are we overbooking certain resources? Let's look at the RAM first. If you remember from a previous lecture, the first thing we do in project management, or one of the first things, is we make a work breakdown structure. That just lists all the activities, all the tasks that have to be completed to do the project. Everything you need to do the project, nothing that's not related to the project. We do the work breakdown structure. With that, we do a bunch of things. We make a Gantt chart, which is our schedule, and we do that in our Gantt project software, or Microsoft Project if you're using that. For the schedule, you just list all your tasks, all your work breakdown structure, beginning date, and duration is usually how you do it. And then you link your predecessors. And next step we do with work breakdown structure is we do cost tracking. And that was also in a previous lecture. We take the entire work breakdown structure and we track our budget, we track our cost to date, percent complete, what we expect our cost to complete to be, how much we need to spend to finish the job, our overall costs, and all those costing activities. And next, we take our work breakdown structure and we create a responsibility assignment matrix from it, a RAM. We use the same format for each of these steps, and then in a later lecture we're going to use it again for a risk assessment. But let's look at the RAM. Here I've got the work breakdown structure. I've got all my activities that have to be done. And then across the top, I listed a lot of the different participants or players in the project. We've got our project sponsor, our project manager, maintenance, subcontractors, inspectors, finance, student union, neighbors, people that live nearby the project. Okay, so we've got all the people that might be involved, all the things that go on, and how do we organize it now? Let's take a look at something a little different. It's called a Rossi chart. So Rossi is an acronym for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And you don't need to get too caught up in it. You don't have to assign a level for each task, but the important thing, the most important one is the R, the responsible. Who is going to do that task? Second, and it's not always necessary for every task, but who's accountable for making sure the task gets done? Not necessarily doing the task, but who needs to make sure that it actually gets done? And then in some cases, you may have people that are consulted or informed on what's going on. Let's take a look at our responsibility assignment matrix again. Here what I've done, and I haven't finished this, but I've started. I start with the R's first because I want to decide who's doing each task. So here we've got purchase mill. The project manager is responsible for that. They're responsible for quotes and for placing the order. But notice with place order, in addition to project manager being responsible, I've got some other involvement. Here I've got the student union, they're being consulted. So we want to bring them in and make sure that they've got some input into the decision of which machine to buy. The neighbors, they might be informed. They don't really have an active part, but we let them know what's going on. We might tell the inspector that we're making this purchase so that they know what's coming. So we tell different people different amounts of information. The next one, pay invoices. Well, finance is responsible for that, and the project manager is responsible to be accountable to make sure it gets done. They don't actually do it, but they're responsible to make sure it gets done. So each one of these different tasks needs different levels of involvement from different people. For example, up here in getting quotes, it's not maybe such a big deal that it doesn't need involvement from a lot of people, so the project manager does that. He doesn't consult or inform anyone else. The idea is not to populate this chart 100%. The idea is to use this to help you keep track of who needs to be involved in which activity and at which point. And over on the side here, I've got an equipment list. And I don't want to list every single little piece of equipment that's going to be involved. What I want to do is I want to keep track of things that are maybe unusual or different. For shipping, I know we're going to need some trucks involved. We're going to need a forklift, and maybe a forklift is not normally available in this department. And I've got some other things here, and maybe this is pretty redundant. For plumbing, I put down that we need a torch to solder the plumbing lines. That's pretty obvious that a plumber's going to need their tools. So probably I wouldn't want to keep track of little equipment or everyday type of equipment. I certainly don't need to tell an electrical inspector that they need to bring their meter to do an inspection. We don't want to keep track of the little stuff. We want to keep track of the big stuff and the unusual stuff. And that's what we put into this chart, the responsibility assignment matrix. All right, the second part of resource management is resource loading. How much of each resource do we need and when are they scheduled? And to do that, we use our software. And here's a quick look. If you look at this resource is maintenance. And over here, they're assigned to two different tasks, main electrical connections and control wiring. Those are scheduled on the same day, and we might only have one electrician. So that one resource can't do those two activities on that day, and here it shows as red that we've got a problem. Let's take a look at that software. Here's my same project in Gantt project. Now I want to do some resource management, and I can do some of it in this software. The first thing I have to do is I have to add in some resources. You see here I've got material and I've got maintenance listed. I can list those because if I click on Resource Chart, I've created resources for those. So I'm going to create one more resource. I'll go to Resources, New Resource, and I'm going to call this Inspector. And I'm not going to bother with any of this other information. You can put on what days off that they normally take, and you can give them a custom calendar, but I don't want to get into all those little details. It doesn't make any sense for this type of project. All right, so I have my inspector. I hit OK, and now my inspector is showing up. They don't have any assignment yet. So let's go back to my Gantt chart. And one thing you have to do, if this resource column is not displayed, you have to right click anywhere and go to Manage Columns and find where it says Resources, click on that and say Show Selected. So if I, for example, I want to show duration, I'll click on that, Show Selected, and it pops up. I'm going to hide that. I can see my resources, and if I go down here, I'm going to add some more in. So I'll say computer panel. Oops, I clicked on the wrong one, I think. So I double clicked on the task. I go to resources, and resource name, I'm going to say maintenance. And then for these inspections, I'm going to assign inspectors to those. Oops, that went in the wrong place. Delete. Okay. It's best to click on it once first and then double click, I guess. That way you know you get the right one. So I have inspector there. Inspector here. And inspector again. Now when I go back to my resource chart, I can see under inspector, and I can expand this. I can see that there's 3 activities that the inspector is doing, and it looks like they all fall on different time frames. So even though I've got 3 things going on, I don't have any problem with my inspectors. With my maintenance guys, I've got some problems because I've got tasks going on 2 at the same time. So it looks like control wiring and main electrical need to be, I'll just shift that over to make sure. Control wiring and main electrical need to be on different days to get rid of this conflict. Go back to my Gantt chart and find control wiring. And what I'll do is I'll just make one dependent on the other. So now they're staggered a little bit. I'll go back to my resource chart and now I don't have any conflicting assignments. That's what it means to level your resources. You need to not only look at your Gantt chart and when you want to schedule work, but you need to look at what resources are assigned to those different tasks and make sure that you're not overloading one of your resources. Sometimes you just need to spread out your schedule and you can't do it as fast as you'd like to because you don't have enough resources to do it. Okay, that's the lecture on resource management. Thanks for listening.